Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this afternoon on Introduction to T-Levels. My name is Lydia IMechE. I'm the Professional Development and Education Policy Advisor at the IMechE. And my role is just bringing knowledge and support for across our policy and membership and accreditation activities. The purpose of this webinar is to raise awareness of the engineering and manufacturing T-level and to provide some information on what the T-levels are and the impact it will have on the engineering education landscape. We'll be joined today by Scott Wilkins, who's the Industry Manager for Engineering, Manufacturing and Construction at City and Guilds, and Kira Harper, who's Director of Technical Qualifications and Essential Skills at the Department for Education. There's plenty of time for questions, so please submit your questions throughout the webinar, and then we'll have time at the end once both presenters have spoken, and then we can go through those questions. So I'll now hand over to Scott, who will start discussing with us.
Thank you, Lydia. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm just shortly going to take you through a slide deck giving an introduction into the T-levels themselves, where they fit within the new educational landscape going forward, and then go into the detail around how they are delivered and how that links into the wider components of the T-level program with respect to the work placement as well. Okay, I'm going to turn off my camera and then share my screen to save bandwidth and take you through the presentation. So just bear with me and I'll get that set up. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. Lydia, could you just confirm that?
Yeah, that's working.
That's brilliant, thank you. Okay, so as I say, this slide deck will take you through the engineering and manufacturing T-level, which we have developed in partnership with EAL, and of which went live in September 2023. So there's many people who are involved in the delivery of the T-level program, and there's some of the team there with their contact details there. So any of you that are involved in the delivery or have those within your networks who are involved in delivery of T-levels, do feel free to share these contact details. So there's myself, Industry Manager for Engineering Manufacturing, Alison Whittle, who is our technical advisor for deals mostly with our HEIs, our universities and post-16. We have John O'Porter, Jess Sow and Sam Ashman, who are technical advisors who are focused with the centres and the providers with regards to onboarding and delivery of the T-levels. So I'm going to take you through, as mentioned, the T-levels, where they fit within the landscape, moving on to industry placements, progression, and our website and support that we offer around the T-levels. So starting off then with T-levels and where they fit within the landscape. So essentially, in the new world, post-16, there are three routes that a young person can take on completion of their GCSEs. The first, which we'll likely be familiar with, is the A-level route, which are subject-based qualifications run over 2 years at a local school or college. You then have, over on the far right there, you have the apprenticeship routes at level 2, level 3, which run for a minimum of 12 months in duration and comprise 80% off the job and 80% on the job and 20% off the job training. And then in the middle there, you have the new T-levels. Now, these are technical qualifications designed to run over 2 years and delivered through local colleges, schools and training providers, and that would include UTCs in that as well. It is 80% classroom based and crucially 20% in a work placement. And that is designed to build attitudes, behaviours, and to develop those practical skills, so that actually at the end of a T level you're having somebody more rounded than what you may have had through other full-time study programs of the past. And they allow possible progression into higher education, employment, onto an apprenticeship, or onto a degree or higher apprenticeship. So in terms of the structure of a T-level program, it consists of a number of component parts. So it includes a technical qualification, which is the bit that ourselves at City and Guilds have developed. And that includes core theory, concepts and skills relevant to the industry sector, along with specialist skills and knowledge for an occupation or career, and then an industry placement with an employer. There are UCAS points which are allocated to the T-level programme, and they are equivalent to 3 A-levels. And if required, a student would be required to work towards English and maths if they do not already have a grade 4 at GCSE. So if we look there at the middle section of that slide, you have the first component, which is the core component of a T-level, and that core overarches all 3 T-levels. So in engineering manufacturing, there's 3 T-levels, which I'll go through in a minute. And that is 50%. That core is nominally 680 GLH, and is graded A star to C, and consists of 2 papers, 2 assessment papers. One is on maths and science, and paper 2 is on the engineering concepts. And then there is also an employer set project. For clarity, that project isn't set in the workplace. That project is set by ourselves, but we work with a range of employers to develop that employer set project assessment. And that covers the concepts and theories, which also includes the core skills. And the assessment, as it says there, is set exam and employer set project marked by City and Guilds. So the second part then is the occupational specialism, which I'll come on to a bit more detail in the next couple of slides. And that's the remaining 50% of the total qualification time. And it's graded pass, merit, distinction, linked to the occupational maps, and covers those practical skills and knowledge which are needed to work and progress within a specialist occupational area. An assessment there is synoptic assignment, which is externally set and marked by centres and moderated by ourselves. And then you've got three boxes at the bottom there. You've got your industrial placement, which is a minimum of 45 to 60 days. That can be done with 2 employers, so not just 1 employer. That can be done with a second employer as well. There's maths and English, or GCSE or functional skill at level 2 if required. And then finally there, the tutorial, which is those enrichment, pastoral support hours as well. So all of those component parts are what make up a T-level program. They don't, they're not. It's not just the T-level qualification itself. The industry placement, the maths and English, and tutorial are all fundamental to that T-level program. So in terms of the T-level itself, I mentioned there's 3 qualifications. So you have the overarching core there, which runs across all 3 T-levels, and then you have the 3 T-level qualifications are: one is design and development, one is maintenance, installation and repair, and one is engineering, manufacturing, process control. And all learners must complete the core, and then they would choose one of those 3 T-levels. So for argument's sake, they would choose the design and development, under which there is a number of occupational specialisms. So under design development, there's a range of occupational specialisms, same for maintenance, installation, repair, and same for engineering, manufacturing, process control. And a learner would pick one of those occupational specialisms. So if we take design and development as an example, you will have your core, you will choose design and development pathway, and then you can see there's 4 occupational specialisms there: mechanical engineering, electrical electronic engineering, control and instrumentation, and structural engineering. and they would choose, or a provider would deliver one of those. Well, a provider may deliver more than one, but a young person would only study on one of those occupational specialisms. Similarly, for maintenance, installation, repair, you can see there that there are five occupational specialisms, and the same rules apply. They would choose one of those occupational specialisms. And on to engineering, manufacturing, process and control, you can see the 4 occupational specialisms that are listed there. And again, just one would be selected. So in terms of the assessment, you can see there the core is 2 exam papers and the employer set project, and you can see there the marks and the overall weighting of the assessment. And then for the occupational specialist component, you can see there the for each of the occupational specialisms, you can see the assessment method there and the weighting that would have as well. And you will have these slides shared, by the way, so you can go back and reflect on them at your leisure as well. So in terms of the technical qualification itself, so what's going to be covered in the core? So you can see there, they are the units and the associated guided learning hours, which make up the core. So those units you see there are all delivered as part of the core and common across all 3 of those pathways. And looking at the examination, paper 1 and paper 2, you can see there that paper 1 focuses on your maths, your science, materials, mechanical, electrical, electronic principles and mechatronics, and then paper 2 focuses on things like your engineering control systems, quality management, health and safety, and the other units that you can see there. So moving on to the employer set project and the 3rd component of the assessed component of the core, it's classroom-based assessment which is undertaken in controlled conditions and prescribed within the candidate and centre guidance pack. It's an employer set project, and it will assess the skills and application of the core knowledge within the technical qualification. And each project is developed with employers in the industry to reflect the realistic types of developments, activities and challenges that would be faced in occupations within the industry. And as mentioned, it's linked to the core skills as well. It's made up of a number of tasks which relate to the same brief. Although each employer set project will have different tasks relating to each pathway. For example, in design and development, the tasks are research, design, plan and present. And as mentioned, it is developed in conjunction with employers, so it's a realistic brief to be achieved through the completion of research and plan, present, review tasks designed to offer appropriate evidence under the assessment conditions. And I won't dwell too much on this slide, but that just gives you a sense for the type of the design specification for the employer set project. And again, we have, to underpin all of the qualification, we do have a range of digital learning resources, smart screen resources, tutor packs to support delivery of the qualification as well. And just moving on to a specification of a typical unit there, that gives you a sense for the performance outcomes within one unit, so in this case mechanical engineering. So that gives you a flavour for what performance outcomes there are and the underpinning knowledge outcomes that exist for that standard. And for the exemplar assessment, that's a typical type of assignment brief that a young person would have to complete as part of that unit. Okay, just moving on to our website, as I mentioned, there's a range of support materials that are available to support delivery of T-levels, whether you're an employer or whether you're a young person or whether you're a provider delivering the T-levels. And it all starts off from our landing page, cityandguilds.com. You can either enter in the search bar there our qualification number, which is commonly a 4-digit number. So the example there is 8730, which is the T-level qualification for engineering and manufacturing. Or you can scan through our T-level qualification tab within the landing page of the website there. And that will take you through to everything we offer, the assessment materials, centre documents, a range of support materials as well in support of the T-level and for the core and also the occupational specialisms as well. Just giving you some examples there of the materials that are available. Again, the tabs, you just click on the tab and it rolls down to give more detail and links to relevant resources. So in terms of the industrial placement, so every T-level includes an industrial placement with an employer focused on developing the practical and technical skills required for the occupation. It must last a minimum of 45 days or 315 hours, but it can last longer. And providers will be ensuring that learners have an industrial placement and will support employers offering industrial placements. We are also working within our networks as well to try to link employers with providers, with the sector, to educate around T-levels, how the two come together and actually what the benefits are as well within local and regional areas. And so the benefits of T-levels are huge and positively impact on the career of the paths taken by young people. Employers have much to gain from hosting T-level placements. Typically, they'll benefit from the solution T-level provides to tackle skill shortages. They're supporting and developing the future talent pool within local areas and are realising that students bring innovative and new ideas and a fresh perspective, whilst also helping with day-to-day projects. So a couple of updates there for the updated guidance for the T-level industry placement there that you can see around funding and how that can be claimed. And as I mentioned before, they can be delivered across more than one employer. And there's a useful website there, a useful slide there, which gives a range of links, depending whether you're an employer or a provider, to give more detail around the T-levels themselves, but also work placements and funding as well. So when the slides are shared, do take a look at that. It's some really rich and useful information that's available out there. And again, as I mentioned, progression routes from T-levels are onto apprenticeships with an occupational specialism, onto a higher apprenticeship, higher education or employment. And there's just some of the degree programs to which you can progress onto from a T-level. I won't dwell on these next couple of slides too much because the slides will be shared, but there's a range of ways that we support the sector, whether you're an employer or a provider, with T-levels, as we do with all of our programs and apprenticeships. And they can be found through links there and also through our website. But of course, if anyone's got any questions outside of this, my details are on that second slide, so do feel free to get in touch with us or with me. We also run a range of webinars and events throughout the year, so do sign up to our to these via our website as well. And finally there, what I just mentioned is I also co-chair a industry employer board, which is made up of employers through across the country, from employers of all sizes, from across the breadth of the sector. And this is really key to helping us understand what your needs are as employers, both now and into the future as well. And that really does shape our thinking and our strategy around where we develop in the future. So if anyone's interested in joining our board, do get in touch with me, and I can pick up with you outside of this and give more detail. But I would urge you to do that, because your voice as employers has never been so valuable and important to us. So do get in touch with me around the employer board or the T levels themselves. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand back to Lydia now for the next session of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. That's really helpful to just get an overview of the engineering manufacturing T level. As I said at the start, if you do have any questions, please do post them as we go through, and I'll go through them after we've heard from Kira as well. So now I'm going to hand over to Kira, and Kira, please.
Thanks, Lydia, and a huge thank you to everyone who's joined today, and particularly thank you there for that great presentation from City and Guilds. So I think, if you like, what you've just heard is the kind of what is a T level, and I'm here today from the Department of Education. I'm the Director for Technical Qualifications and Essential Skills. That basically means, to put it simplistically, if it's not an apprenticeship, a GCSE, an A-level, or a SAT, or a degree, it's me and my team, which is, I won't bore you with the thousands of qualifications that we cover, but it is an extremely large number. And as part of my remit, I have T levels and the reforms that we are trying to drive as part of that. So what I thought I'd do is kind of contextualize, if you like, what we are hoping to achieve through this reform with T levels, what we hope that it will then lead to, both for that young person, but also, I think, for the engineering sector. And then I thought I would just talk a little bit about kind of what you can do, what we're hoping that you will do, and what you'll get out of it. You've heard a little bit of that already, but I'll just hopefully build on some of that through my presentation. So I'm not going to use slides, certainly not as thorough as the ones you've seen anyway. So I just thought I'd do a relatively short talk to make sure that we've got as much time as possible for questions, because actually I think it is only through that kind of Q&A that we'll really get to, I think, some of the meat of what I suspect might be holding some of you back. So I'm really keen to make sure that we've got enough time to do that. But first of all, starting off with why this reform, why are we doing it, what's the point? So I think, as you heard a little bit there already, what we have at the moment is a relatively complicated vocational education system with a very, very, very large number of different qualifications that sit within it. A number of years ago now, and as a result of an enormous amount of consultation, discussion, debate, and refinement, there was an agreement that what we would do is move from the very complex vocational landscape that we have now, which we know is creating quite a lot of confusion and putting people off going down that vocational route, towards a higher quality, higher value, simpler route, which is where the T level came about. And the idea for the T level is effectively it is sitting in the middle, as that slide beautifully demonstrated, between an A level and an apprentice. So it's designed for those students who don't necessarily want to make that jump into full-time work, effectively doing what you would need to do as an apprenticeship, recognizing that most of your time is spent on the job. It also recognizes that there needs to be something for those students who are perhaps not necessarily wanting to do that A-level and heavily academic route, but want to do something that is more hands-on and is crucially more vocational. And that is where the T-level fits in. So if ever there was a sector which it feels like the T-level was designed for, it probably is engineering, because when I used to be the Deputy Director for STEM in the department, the message that I heard more than any other when talking to the engineering sector was, if people could just get hands-on with doing this, they would love it, because it's brilliant. And that's what makes engineering so fantastic. It's the ability to go out and solve that problem and build that thing and take apart that machine. And that is what this is all about. So what you've seen today from Scott is just how rigorous a qualification it is. It allows you to do all of that breaking things and building things and making things, but it also ensures that when you're leaving the qualification, you have that hard knowledge that you're going to need in order to make a success of your engineering career long term. So it allows you, if you want to either move straight into the world of work, if that's what you want to. It allows you to move into an apprenticeship, if that's what you want to do, or it can allow you to move up into higher education, if that's what you want to do too. So I think that it really does offer the kind of best of all worlds, and that is what it's intended for. I think that what I would say is that we're still at the very early stages of qualification reform. Changing a new qualification is really hard, and it is a multi-year thing. I think we would probably say it is unquestionably a 5, if not a 10-year journey to go from where we are now, which is effectively, with a very, very small cohort. We've only got about 1,500 students currently taking the engineering qualification, to where we want to get to, which is that this is seen as just as valuable an alternative for students to take as an A-level. So when you come to take your choices at 15, you decide, yeah, I want to do a T-level because that really works for me. And it's recognized as that high quality, well-rounded qualification that hopefully you've seen today. I think the other thing that is really important and is at the heart of these reforms is that this is a qualification that is based on standards that have been designed by employers. So one of the challenges that we have with some of the existing vocational qualifications is that although some of them may have had some employer input, they aren't based on that consistent standard. And you can't then apply that consistent standard up into apprenticeships. So you don't have that kind of single golden thread, if you like, going through. Whereas with T-levels, they are based on the same standards that the apprenticeship standards are based on. And so effectively what you end up with is that kind of continuity in someone's learning journey to allow them to move up the chain, or the educational ladder, as our ministers are currently calling it. So that gives you a sense of kind of what the T-level is, where it fits into the wider educational landscape. I'm just going to do a little bit on kind of why I think it's so important for the engineering sector to get behind. So right now, the biggest challenge that we have on T-levels is not that students don't want to do it. It's not that teachers don't want to teach it. It's not that it's not well funded, because we provide extra funding on top of your normal funding that you would normally get as an educational provider to teach it. The challenge that we have around T-levels is we need to have enough industry placements to allow the college to then offer the course to the student. And at the moment, what we're hearing is that some colleges are restricting the numbers of students that they want to put on courses because they're worried about finding the placements. So without those placements, a student can't pass their T-level. So of course, a college is not going to put loads and loads of students on that course until they know that they can find that placement. So the thing that above all, I would really, really ask you all to do and think about coming out of today is, can you offer a placement to a student? Because that is the only way that this is going to work. And I appreciate, and I think we recognise in the department what a big ask that is, which is partly why we have funding in place to enable it to happen, to support you to offer that placement. As you've heard a little bit from City and Guilds, there's an enormous amount of work that happens both from within the department, from within the college, from within the City and Guilds team as well, to try and make sure that that is working. I'm not saying it's perfect. I think we know that there are some challenges there, but we do a lot to try and make sure it's a workable product and a workable kind of exercise for you. But what I would like everyone to do is to just pause for a minute and think back to who was it who gave you your first job, who gave you your first break into engineering that meant that you knew that you wanted to be an engineer. And I think what I come back to is the story that I heard time and again from so many different engineers when I was working with the STEM sector, and also I've just come off working on nuclear policy in the Department for Energy and Net Zero. The story I heard was usually something like, I left school at 16 without great qualifications. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it just so happened that such and such a company down the road was offering a job. And so I started off on the shop floor, on the factory floor. And I kind of thought, I'm quite good at this. I can do this. I'm going to get into it. And I iteratively improved. And as I did more, I worked my way up the ladder. I retrained. I moved on to doing a proper apprenticeship. And then I retrained again. And then I retrained again. And here I am in the organization, 20, 30 years later. And often it may well still be the same organization. And it was really surprising, actually, the number of engineers who would come back to the organization that they started at. And I think what we've really learned through all of our educational reforms, including some of the work we're doing on apprenticeships, is just how incredibly valuable that first contact is, that opportunity, that big break that you give someone. So if you're taking a T-level student, you have all the benefit of that first qualification, of that first contact, that emotional connection. But you have it in a relatively kind of, dare I say it, risk-free way to yourself as an organization, because you only have them as a student for 45 days. It's not like an apprenticeship. You're not employing them. So you have the benefit of that contact. You can get to know them. They can get to know you. If it works out at the end, you can stay in touch with them, and you may well want to end up employing them as an apprenticeship, but you don't have to. There's no obligation there. If it works out and they go on to do a degree, they'll stay in touch with you if you want them to, or you will with them, and you may hire them as a graduate. But again, there's no reason that you need to. It's just that you've given them that first break, that first taste of what it's really like to be in the sector. And I think what we're hearing from students is the reason that they're liking T-levels so much, particularly compared to some of the existing vocational qualifications, is it gives them that opportunity to work in the real world, see it for themselves, and see the benefit of what they can get that's different from simply being just in a classroom all day long. So I think that certainly when we talk a lot, and we hear a lot from the engineering sector as a whole about the challenges that you have with recruitment, and I think that we really recognise that, and it concerns us, obviously. But we're often asked, what can we do about it? What is the answer here? What's the silver bullet? And I think sitting in front of you here today, a month into this job as I am, I would say to you, of all the things that you could do, it's not going into a school to get a child to build a bridge. It's definitely not going into a university to talk to students who are already taking engineering degrees. It's taking a T-level student, because you're getting somebody right at the start of when they're making that critical choice about their future. And if you're getting that student and you're enthusing that student, you're not just enthusing that student, you're enthusing all of their peer group about what engineering can do. And not just their peer group, but down the school, because students don't just talk to one another. They talk to, their brothers and their sisters and their cousins, because they're a network like any other. Their people obviously too. So I think that it is having that ability to make that journey real, not just real for an hour or a couple of hours in a classroom, but actually real for somebody. And, you're literally offering a life-changing opportunity in many cases here. So that is quite an emotional plea from me of what I think has been a very helpful and really detailed presentation from Scott. And I think that I'd be really keen to, I guess, hear the questions that you've got, but also hear any feedback you've got. And I think we recognise that we're at the foothills of these reforms. We've got a long way to go, but we're not going to succeed without the sectors behind us. So really, really keen to make sure that, we're working with you and remain open to ideas, suggestions. But yeah, above all, if you can leave today and think, oh, maybe I will just offer a placement, or think about offering a placement, then that, I think, for us would be success. Thank you.
Thanks, Kira. And it's really great to hear about why this has come about and where you kind of see this heading as well. I just want to give a couple of points about how the IMechE is engaging in some work at the moment, and then we'll go into questions. If you do have any further questions, please do continue to add them to the chat. We have a few and we will go through them shortly. As Kira said, the big thing for us is to invite businesses to sign up to host placement students. There's a lot of information on that on the Gov website, and we can signpost you to that as well if needed. But we also want to facilitate how this happens as well, and give as much guidance to employers, to engineering employers as we can. So after this webinar, in the coming months, we'll be hosting other sort of roundtable discussions, which is just to help to understand the barriers again to hosting placements. So we're supported by DFE and Gatsby and of course City and Guilds to create that environment to allow you to ask your questions, and we can see how we can support that as well. We're also working with Royal Academy of Engineering to develop placement toolkits and placement task profiles, and that will give you some further information on the kind of tasks that T-level students can support your business with, and that you can give to them so that is value added on both sides. As a body of PEIs, we have updated our documentation pertaining to routes into engineering. So this does now include T-levels, and that's available for all STEM ambassadors. So if you are still engaging in activities in schools, you can reach that through the Tomorrow's Engineers website. And we also host STEM ambassador webinars, and there's a specific one on providing advice on routes into engineering, and that webinar will be next month as well. There are other forums where we're linking employers with providers as well. So Scott has spoken about their employer industry forum, and we're also working with the Education Training Foundation to bring that together. So offering placements for, or not placements, but sort of days where providers can also understand how to make their teaching relevant to industry as well. So these are just a few ways to sort of engage with the T-level activities that are happening around, but also sort of from a PEI side, we are considering membership for T-level learners. So that will be similar to what we offer to students and apprentices. So once we're advertising that, we'll let you know as well. And then I think a key part for our memberships as well is we want to be able to support sort of mapping the learning from T-levels to apprenticeships, and that can sort of help to provide the portfolio of evidence towards the EngTech professional registration as well. So all of these activities are happening to support T-levels in the background as well. I just want to get into some of the questions now. Somebody has asked, sorry, I've lost the questions now. A simple one is what practical things can a secondary school governor help to boost T-levels? I don't know which one of you would like to sort of take that one to start with.
I'm happy to have a go, and I'm sure Kira, feel free to dive in. Yeah, I mean, I'm a chair of governors at a school myself, and our similar question. And to be honest, I think it's about communicating. I think there's still a surprising amount of misinformation even, but there's a lot of people still don't know what T-levels are, where they fit into the overall ecosystem at post 16. And actually, so it's about communicating, breaking down those barriers and giving clarity over what T-levels are, where they fit, but also the benefits of them. They are robust technical qualifications, and it's preparing people really well for progression onto higher education or into the workplace. They are very focused on the occupational maps. They link to apprenticeship standards, and you have that real employer aspect of it as well, which is so important and give such clear benefits. So again, I'm sure that providers out there have good employer networks and employer contacts, and it's promoting that, giving a sense of confidence, I guess, really as well, to that, and how that can support a young person on their journey. Kira, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I just echo quite a lot of that. I mean, it's worth just remembering T-levels were only launched in 2020, so we're really only in year 3. Like, this is very, very, very early. And if you think about any other qualification, even if you're asking kind of the average person on the street, have you heard of like a Cambridge National? They'll probably say, what's Cambridge National? And they've been around for quite a lot longer. So it's going to be a while. And I think the more that we all can collectively do to get the message out there through our networks, as a school governor, even as a parent at the school gates, whatever you can do to just raise awareness, that's going to help, because fundamentally we know that the best way to spread awareness is actually by word of mouth, because you trust people who they're the most trusted kind of forum that you can have. We are doing an enormous amount of advertising. We have something called Get the Jump, which is part of a wider Skills for Life comms push that we do across the department. You'll probably see more of that coming up through June and July as we run into exam season and beyond. But it's always going to be a work in progress. And it's worth saying that probably as the people on the call, you might not necessarily see quite a lot of that comms, because it's not directed at you, it's directed at a student. So unless you spend an awful lot of time on something like TikTok, you're not necessarily going to see it. That doesn't mean it's not happening. So it's just worth keeping that in mind. But I think really, really worth stressing. It's a great qualification, but people obviously need to want to offer it. We can't force the school to offer it, so that school needs to want to come forwards and offer it. We are doing quite a lot as a department to try and nudge people in that direction. So we're only in the 3rd year, and up until now we've been quite restrictive on which schools and colleges can offer this. So you could only offer it if you were kind of good or outstanding. We're now lifting that restriction, so anyone can offer it. But we're also doing something which is obviously much more contentious, which is that over time, what we're proposing to do is remove the funding from all the other level 3 qualifications that aren't T-levels or aren't a really small number of applied general qualifications. And so as kind of T-levels phase out, because we haven't fully phased them out at this stage, the funding will kind of gradually withdraw for all the alternatives. So effectively, you'll see BTEC funding will be removed, Cambridge National funding will be removed, et cetera, until you're basically just left with a simplified system with therefore a simplified funding mechanism.
Great, thank you. I think you've covered some of the other questions in terms of the BTEC as well. So I guess the picture is that if the T-level will inevitably replace the BTEC in engineering.
Correct, that is right.
Another question about the industrial placement providers. Are you engaging with OEMs and supply chains and trade bodies? Are you lobbying with them to kind of show them that this is a key part of their strategy?
Yeah, we absolutely are. So I think I mentioned that I have just joined from Department of Net Zero, and I was working really closely with colleagues in the high value manufacturing catapult there, the nuclear one. Believe me, I'll be turning straight back around and saying, you should be doing some T-levels, because I spent an awful lot of time in my old role talking about all of the challenges we had on nuclear skills supply, of which there are many, and this is actually one possible way that we can try and fix those challenges. I think that we also work really closely with IMechE UK and actually all the kind of large industry bodies. We work with Engineering UK, RA Engineering, and actually we're doing a project with them at the moment specifically to look at the kind of maths content of the T-level. So yeah, we're absolutely in contact with them. Lobbying is a funny word to say kind of as government, that you're lobbying outwards, because we're not sort of lobbying per se, but I guess we're trying to do some of what Scott's kind of alluded to there, which is inform and advise, because fundamentally this is not going to succeed unless industry gets behind it. And what we've seen is some industry groups have really got behind it, some employers have really got behind it, but like anything, you know, adaptation and change is slow. So it's about keeping that conversation open and continuing to try and address some of the misinformation that's out there.
Great, thanks. Is there any plan for delivery of T levels in more rural or remote areas where there aren't such large businesses?
So I think this is a really good question, and one that we are currently grappling with. So there are mitigations that we've put in place to try and tackle that. The first is that we have actually also given colleges and other training providers quite a bit of funding to help them counteract some of that challenge. For example, some of them have actually bought buses to transport students around to allow them to better access industry placements in areas where they have a kind of very, very rural student population and would struggle to get to a placement otherwise. But I think that there's a recognition that, you know, fundamentally, we're keen to make sure that a student can work in their local area. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, one of the questions I got asked an enormous amount when I worked on nuclear was a really deep concern from places like, you know, for example, Anglesey, who obviously are very, very keen to see a new nuclear power station built out there, and understandably so. But they're worried that in doing so, they'll see a huge kind of hemorrhaging of skills. And what they have at the moment is all of their young people go off somewhere else because that's where the work is. And I think that there's an element here that if you have industries that are based in kind of small towns and small rural locations, you know, they do really, really struggle to get the skills pipeline that they need. And if you can try and connect up your local college or your school with that organization, that's actually a good thing, because it might allow those organizations to thrive and survive in a way that they might not otherwise get to do, because unlike a large national employer, they're simply not necessarily going to be on the radar of your local 16-year-old. You don't know what's behind that industrial park door until you know.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. How do we manage concerns around safeguarding in the workplace?
I guess would it be possible to build on this question? What does somebody mean by that?
Oh, so the fact that placement students are 16 to 18 years old, and there are sort of safeguarding and health and safety issues in some workplaces. So how are we mitigating and managing that?
So I think ultimately it's obviously for every employer to work out, you know, kind of what they need to do to make sure that that person can stay safe when they're working for them. I guess I slightly hark back to the example that I gave in my speech, which is I hear this a bit, and I'm always a bit curious to know where it comes from, which is it wasn't so very long ago that you would leave school at 16 and go straight into the workplace. And it sort of slightly implies somehow that a 16-year-old is going to behave more recklessly and be more dangerous than any other person would be. And I'm not sure that's actually true. So, but I think I'm, you know, very open to, I think that there's a kind of nuance in that. So I think what I'm quite keen, and I would be really open to hearing from those on this call about is examples of where, for example, your company policy doesn't allow for it because of insurance, because we do hear that. And I think I'm really keen to unpack, like, can we do something about that? Because that shouldn't really be the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I don't know if you have any examples from the construction T level. That seems to be going quite well, and I don't know.
Very well. And we don't, I mean, obviously, like anything, you know, people have to be careful. There are health and safety rules that need to be adhered to with good reason. But, you know, like anything, that industry is very used to taking young people and taking young people on site, and they do so very successfully. And those young people do go on to kind of learn and thrive and then carry on to succeed in the sector as a result. If anything, we almost have the problem that they get poached a bit too fast.
And I think one thing I'd just add on that is the idea of the work placement is to look at those skills, behaviours, knowledge from across the T level. So while a young person may want to be, for argument's sake, an aircraft engineer, it's unlikely in their work placement they'll get to work on a live aircraft. However, that organisation has a range of other job functions which all add value to the T level and the behaviours and skills and that they would learn without working on a live aircraft. So I think you've got to look at the wider context of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I was trying to think of this in the context of nuclear skills, which is obviously the one that I know the best because it's been my most recent foray. But, you know, would I necessarily have a student doing the welding for a critical component in the reactor core? Probably not. Would I have that student perhaps welding some of the pipe work that I might have in my toilet block, which I will need to build as part of my nuclear site? Yes, I might. So I think it's a kind of range of what you might reasonably expect a student to do and where you could expect them to do it.
That's great. I think this one's probably aimed more towards something that I can answer. So about T levels leading to becoming a chartered engineer, I think it can quite clearly. I think it's the learning beyond that as well. So what person goes on to do in terms of university or an apprenticeship, both of those paths do lead to becoming professionally registered. So the T level will have no impact on that. I think the T level is kind of the almost the gateway into the industry, and that's how we should view it rather than kind of an end in and of itself.
Lydia, do you mind if I just quickly answer Graham's question, because I think it's quite a straightforward answer. So the answer is no. T levels are a level 3 qualification in and of themselves. So they should actually act as a bridge to a level 4 apprenticeship, if that's what you want to do, which could then move on to a level 5 qualification, for example, an HNC&D, or in my case, we're obviously rolling out higher technical qualifications, which are a revised HNC and HND, if you like, which has kind of had that industry approval stamp on it as well, which takes you to level 5, which would then allow you to move up to level 6 if you wanted to. Does that make sense?
I think we've pretty much covered I guess in terms of the health and safety question, we can work to provide clearer guidance on what's expected as well. I think we can support that activity quite robustly. Yeah. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered.
On Sarah's point, because I think Sarah's made a really good point in the questions there, which is that T levels does allow you a really brilliant opportunity to build a relationship with a college or a school, and it allows you to do that at a very local level, which has huge benefit. It has the benefit that you have that relationship. So right now, a message that I heard, you know, with huge frustration when I was working on STEM, was so many different firms saying, I really want to go in and talk to a school, but they just ignore me. Like, what do I do? What do I have to do to just get a school to let me come in and talk to their students? I want to help. I want to infuse young people to do engineering, but they just won't talk to me. And the answer is they won't talk to you because they are super busy and have a huge amount of work to achieve and are under huge pressure, particularly post-pandemic, to achieve it. But if you have a relationship with them because you're helping them to deliver a part of their qualification, then that dynamic completely changes. You do have the ability to then start to open up other avenues of opportunities, giving talks for those younger students. Or, as I said, it does also allow you to have that kind of greater exposure, if you like, within the school, because your name becomes a recognized brand. You know, students go off and do a T level with you and they say to their friends, oh, I'm going off to company X or company Y. And their friends say, oh, are they that building down the road? Oh, I didn't know there was company there, and so on. So it just helps to A, build awareness, B, build that local relationship, and C, actually kind of create that long-term link with your local community, which is hugely important because your college or your school is usually right at the heart of that local community.
Okay, thank you. I think we've pretty much covered all the questions in the chat. As you say, this is the start of kind of the engagement with members of the IMechE. and wider. So if you would like to support any part of this, if you'd like more information, if you have more questions and want to engage with us further, please email policy@imeche.org. And if there's anything that I need to pass on to Scott and Kira, I'll do so. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say before we close, Scott or Kira.
No, just thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to dial in.
Yeah, and likewise, thanks everyone for taking the time to dial in. I hope you found it useful. And as I say, if there is anything outside of this, do feel free to get in touch.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.